Good morning and welcome to The Crawl, the show where we break down the future of search, brand authority, and everything else AI is rewriting about digital marketing. I'm Tristan Harris, your host, and today we're sitting down with Mitch Parker, founder of Broker Nest AI and Stack 72, to discuss how AI is changing the real estate industry. Mitch Parker is a real estate expert with over 17 years of experience across brokerage, development marketing, and investment strategy. With a strong background on the client side, he brings a practical, results-driven approach to helping individuals and investors make smarter property decisions. Mitch is also at the forefront of innovation in the industry as the founder of platforms BrokerNest.ai and Stack72 to reshape how real estate professionals leverage technology. Today, he's focused on helping people build long-term wealth through strategic real estate investments. So, Mitch, first of all, happy birthday! It's
Thank you
Mitch's
so much,
birthday today.
Tristan. That was a great bio. I love the introduction. Thank you.
Mitch,
Awesome.
thank you so much for joining us today on your birthday. We appreciate you taking the time. And is there anything you want to add? Is there anything about your background you want to kind of go through?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm super excited by AI, obviously. I worked in real estate for a long time. I was a broker for 17 years. And like you mentioned, I worked on the client side. I worked directly for developers in the senior housing space. I did some development marketing, so representing some pretty large scale developers to sell out their residential projects. And so, I saw a lot through my 17 years. And, when AI started becoming a little more mainstream around 2023, 2024 is when I first started playing with it. I quickly realized how rapidly and how vastly this thing was going to change.
Yeah.
My context was real estate, but you could easily take that to industry X, industry Y, and
Mhm.
I don't think anything was ever going to be the same relative to a couple of years ago. And that's only advancing at an even faster rate than it was back then, which is crazy to me.
And that's one of the reasons why, personally, I love this podcast, is that we get to talk to people that are rewriting the script for tons of different industries. We've talked to people that, are doing everything from running newsletters, talking about all things AI and helping people, stay on top of the all the rapid fire changes, to people like yourself who are, deeply embedded in a specific industry and are working to kind of improve it and get to a point where, the intersection of AI and specific industry is, realized. So it's really cool to get to talk to a lot of individuals like you and really dig into how you're utilizing and building out AI to help in those specific industries. For me, it gives us a lot of cool ideas too. Like everybody's doing something different, and all of these cool platforms people are building and ways to connect is really eye opening. So we can dive into some questions. I think the first big one I have: real estate historically, when you think of real estate for, the layperson, you think of like Zillow and, you think of hiring a real estate agent to help you buy or sell. How is AI now being used in the real estate industry?
You know, I think I think an easy reference, and you literally have it on your homepage, like right when you land, is that, you know, AI is not designed to replace a strategy. It's essentially designed to enhance a strategy. And so I'm a big believer, well, while there will be a lot of jobs displaced by AI because of the scale of efficiency that the average individual can accomplish, you just won't need as many people doing the same job. But I think where AI really has its superpower, and I've been saying this for a while now, is when you really combine it with an industry or expertise in one domain. Because, for real estate specifically, I think it's a very human to human business. Someone's generally making their biggest purchase of their entire life. They're not necessarily going to want to defer the decisions to a large language model.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And so, but that being said, I think there's a lot of room for efficiency, where you can handle a lot of tasks. So, what we're seeing is there's a lot of like sales, marketing, and administrative duties that just it doesn't make sense for the average agent to spend hours and hours a week doing. So we can implement both like AI and automation to make these tasks way less time consuming. And ultimately, what that allows the agent to do is, I would automatically default to like be able to work more and like make more sales. And that's just like my mentality as like a entrepreneur. Like I love
Yeah.
working. So I work more. But I think it also allows like freedom of choice. So if you kind of want to have that, like, I want to go home at 5 o'clock and have dinner with my family and spend the evening with them, like, I think it's almost like more crucial to implement these systems because it can get you there faster. So I think for like the average person in the real estate industry, it helps in all of the like assist categories, whereas you can now focus on just being able to talk to clients and close more deals. And then I think on the other side, for clients, it's unbelievable, right? Like just kind of like how when Zillow became a thing, everybody was looking at Zestimates to figure out like
Yeah.
how much their house was worth.
I watched my Zestimate for my house and my townhome I sold a few years ago. I watched them like a hawk, and I'm sure it's not right, but
But it puts you in the ballpark, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's what it is. And I think for the average consumer, you can you're not necessarily just blindly trusting your realtor that he's giving you the right advice. I think
yeah.
like there's nothing wrong with going to Claude or ChatGPT and saying like, hey, listen, we're trying to sell our house. Here's the strategy that our agent came up with. Can you do an analysis of it and look for like any blind spots or any missed opportunities, and sort of be able to
That's
like
interesting.
scale the operation that way. So it's like, I think it brings control back to the buyers and sellers. And, the one thing is like with real estate, it's super easy to get a license. And it doesn't necessarily mean because someone has a real estate license that they're great at their job. And so there are great realtors out there, don't get me wrong. But I would say as a client, you want to be doing the due diligence on the person, but you also want to be doing the due diligence on like on the strategy, because at the end of the day, if you're selling a home, getting the most money for it. If you're buying, you want to be able to make sure that you're getting the best deal. You're not going into an area like, I was just talking to a client um, who he's actually a friend of mine. And he was like, oh, the house I'm in now, I would have never bought it if I would have known what I know now. And I said, why? And he goes, oh, it's like across the street from some homeless shelter, some super shady building.
Mm,
And I was like, well, you could have looked it up on Google Maps. He's like, I know, but I just trusted my realtor. So
mm.
it's like one of those things like, so yeah, you can do some due diligence, but I think with AI, it like supercharges your ability of what you can do.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when we sold our townhome in West Palm, we hired a real estate agent, and we talked to two or three. I never really got a good feel for the strategy. I kind of trusted, hey, this is going to work. This was almost 4 years ago now, kind of before a lot of the AI agents really went mainstream and people got really involved with them. But the idea of being able to say, like, hey, I'd love to know your strategy, and then kind of cross referencing that and being like, is this a good approach for maximizing value out of this asset? I think that that's really, really interesting. It's something, I definitely would have done if I had
And
thought of
your
it 4 years ago.
story, by the way, is like super common. So one of the reasons why I launched Broker Nest was when I was looking at the stats, 46% of people work with the first realtor they speak with. So like half the
Wow.
deals are solely based on the first human that they interact with, not
Wow.
market knowledge, not skills, not experience, just like, hey, Tristan answered the phone. Yeah, he's my guy. I'm going to go with
Wow.
him.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. And so like with that stat combined
Mhm.
with, when I was running a residential sales team, I saw the importance of speed to lead, especially because we were
Mhm.
like heavy in online advertising. And it was like, if you can call within 30 seconds is golden. But if you don't call within 5 minutes, your chance of ever reaching the person goes down by 80%.
'Cause they've called somebody else. They went with that first person they talked to, you know?
Right. They're not registering just with me and waiting for like Mitch to call me back. Like they're registering with like 5 versions of me. And then whoever picks up the phone and calls, that's who they're going to work with half the time. So It's like when I was thinking about problems to solve, um, with AI, one of the easiest for me was Brokernest, because it was like, let's create a voice AI system that integrated in with like an agent's existing CRM and was synced in so that when a new lead came in, it automatically dialed out. But then at the same time, all these people, and a lot of people not in real estate can relate to this. It's like you have a massive database that's so underutilized, right? Like our database, 90% was not being called in the last 6 months. It's too
Wow.
big to accomplish.
Yeah.
So we can deploy our AI into that database. It can make phone calls, re-engage, see who's interested in buying, and sort of revive people. And then we added like a text feature so it can do it via text message. But like the whole premise of the product was around that like speed to lead, high conversion model.
That's awesome. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that as a marketer. We, between our businesses, we have hundreds of thousands of contacts in our database. And there's some that we haven't, maybe haven't purchased in 6 months, right? Those are people that we would love to call, but the sheer scale of it, yeah, it's definitely a challenge of being able to kind of keep up with that size of a database. So again, I think you're right. That does transcend just real estate industry as a whole, and has a lot of applications across every business out there. It's really interesting. I think you know one thing that people see with AI, and I think the most visible intersection of AI and real estate that people see is like, the AI photos people put of like, mocking up, like here's what the room would look like if it was an art studio or, if it was a yoga, gym or whatever. So I think that there's been a fair amount of pushback now that people have started uh kind of utilizing AI to misrepresent what houses look like from like a photo standpoint. I've noticed on Reddit there's a subreddit all about Zillow and like the crazy things people find on there, whether it's houses or whether it's whatever. And something I've seen often come up is like the curbside view. They use AI to show it like here's what it would look like if it had an oak tree and stuff, but they don't
Right.
really disclose that well.
Yeah.
So it's
It's a
really
challenge.
interesting.
It's a challenge. And I think that's, regardless of real estate or not, I
Mhm.
think that's one of those things where the industry will ultimately self-govern itself, I
Mm.
believe. Like you might have to lay a few fines or discipline like for a little bit, but I just think that like it's going to become it'll become weird for like people to do that.
Yeah.
Um like it's right now we're in this like weird phase where there's like a new tool and a new product, and you see it like on your side of it too.
Mhm.
It's like there's always a shiny object. Like shiny object syndrome has never been more dramatic, and
It's insane right now. Yeah.
it's insane. But like I think that there'll be sort of a collapse of a lot of them, and then you'll end up with like the core few,
Mhm.
and then all these like weird things society will figure out, like how much AI is acceptable, how much is not. Like, social media right now, I find it's really turned where they had this like moment where everything was AI. And now you're starting to see like some pushback on it, like
Mhm.
where people don't want the AI slop all over the place. Um, and it almost goes back to that if you're like an expert in your industry and you actually create human content, like you, Tristan, are filming a podcast and it's like real Tristan talking to real Mitch, not like our AI versions.
Oh, no, we're
There's,
both AI. For anybody listening, we're both AI agents.
but there's like much higher value in that human creation. And
Yeah.
I think that will ultimately filter through all of the noise.
That's a really common thread we hear amongst all of our guests that come on here is the goal isn't AI replace everything. The goal is how can AI help you leverage that human connection more. So how does that free up time for a realtor to maybe not have to do so much of the back office work or not so much of, the listing work, and instead be able to, focus on that human connection, whether that's like you mentioned before, whether that's working for people like you and I who probably work a little too much, or whether that's, spending more time with your family. So I think
Yeah.
that's really interesting. And it kind of brings up the question of, with real estate, and this is something we ask in a lot of different industries, but with real estate processes, like what are most vulnerable to automation? And what do you think are like processes and things that aren't? Like an obvious example for a realtor is, showing, right? Like you're not going to get an iPad on wheels to go, show a house, right? Um, but yeah, a lot of the other things could be. So what's your take on that?
So in terms of like ease of automation or really getting
Mhm,
like a high degree of AI assistance, um, anything marketing. So whether it's like
mhm,
content creation, but also in terms of how to market. So like who to market to and marketing strategy. I think that AI, if you use it properly, is like a really good sounding
mhm,
board to hash out like, here's the client that I want to target. How do I go about doing it? And then it can create like a full strategy that you are essentially acting as almost like the puppet to the AI, just executing that. So, like, marketing is one of them. Administration is another one in terms of like getting paperwork from one location to the other automatically and saved in folders and sent to where it needs to go to. That's a big thing. Um, you know, content creation, but like on the asset side. So if you need to create like price lists and floor plans and brochures and
mhm.
anything with like photos, I think is a big thing. Um, and then one big thing that I don't see agents utilize enough is really like overall business strategy. So like in terms of like I want to accomplish X this year, I need your help putting together like a business plan that's going to enable me to do it. And then basically having this like massive brain dump for 45 minutes or an hour, just giving it as much context as possible. And then working through it and ultimately coming up with a plan for the next like 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. That's the sort of the timeline that I think about. And its capabilities is amazing because if you like specific people that you follow, let's say on like on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, you can have it frame the answers like from the context of that person. Like, what would Tristan Harris say about my ex? And it can kick out some unbelievable content and guide business strategy along the way. So I think that's sort of one of the most underutilized things. I think one of the easiest ways to implement it is marketing and content.
Mhm.
And then to switch to the part that I don't think it will replace is like you said, there's the human part of it. I actually, funny enough, I don't think replacing showings is that challenging. I think we'll reach a certain point where we won't need an agent to go on showings. Um, we'll have to get through the safety and the security elements of that, obviously.
Mhm.
But I think where the agent really provides value is in the negotiation and in the overall conversation, bringing the parties together, right? Because AI can't really go to the seller's agent and tell them the story about the buyer,
Mhm.
negotiate, sort of help them understand the context of everything. I think that's going to be the hardest thing to replace overall in real estate.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. It's something I had forgotten about that, our realtor did when we bought this house is they we bought this house 3 years ago, just about, which, the market was heating up and, I'm in South Florida, so I don't think the market ever got cold down here, and, they went to the seller and they said, "Hey, this is a family looking for a nice neighborhood. There's good schools here. They just had a kid. They're really interested. They'd love to come see it." And, there were other offers that may have been around the same as what we offered or more, but they ended up going with us. And I think that you're right, that kind of human connection of connecting the sellers, making sure that they know who's buying and that story and all of that, I think is important.
For commercial properties or anything that's like investment driven,
Mhm.
it's about numbers at the end of the day, right? It's like,
Yeah.
what's the most money that I can get with the least amount of hassles? Whereas, like you said, with your personal house, there's an emotional element to it. Like some people grew up, they raised their kids, they want to make sure that the next family has the ability to do that as well. And that, like you said, can override a little bit of money for knowing that the house is going into good hands. And
Mhm.
that to me, I don't know how AI would ever understand sentiment and be able to
Yeah.
like replace that.
Yeah. And that's really interesting. Um, Christina, our editor who, helps put these shows together, she recently bought a house, very recently. And I don't know if you care to chime in, Christina, but um, she also just had a kid. So I don't know if that weighed in on everything on that side, but I think that really highlights that human element that you're talking about, Mitch, of being able to make that. Like AI would never be able to do that, right? And I think that is such an important part of it. I mean, you have two people here firsthand who have had a positive view of how that helped us buy our homes. So
And they
yeah, I think that's a very, very salient point, Mitch.
and then like on the flip side, like I interestingly think most realtors, because that's the space that I know, but I bet you it scales across. You're going to be like, yeah, this makes total sense. Is like most people are not ready for large scale AI in their business. Like AI is basically putting a rocket pack on whatever you do. And so,
Yes.
like, if you put it on the wrong thing, you will end up really far in the wrong direction. And so, and that's where like Stack 72 came in, because when we were going out with Broker Nest, I rapidly realized most agents are nowhere close to needing the product. There were
Mhm,
some, but what made more sense was like a feeder into Broker Nest, and that became Stack 72, which is like AI readiness for the real estate space. And
mhm,
so we built out like a really cool algorithm that looks across 11 different categories of like a realtor's business. And then we have like a meeting with them. So it's like a 60 to 90-minute meeting. And that transcript goes into, gets put into the algorithm. And then we generate this cool report. I jump in, I do a bunch of edits to it. And it really figures out like what they're doing well, what the bottlenecks are, what the gaps are. And it's funny because most of the time, the greatest opportunities have nothing to do with AI or automation. It's like you have a database that you don't touch, but you have a lot of time. So, like, if you get on the phone and make calls and like reconnect with people,
mhm.
you're going to be able to do that. And like, if you just organize your day and structure your day, so there's like a lot of things before you even get to AI. And I think there's like the hype everybody wants to do AI, but if you just put it on top of a shaky foundation, I don't think you get the results. And that's what a lot of people are going through right now, where they're like, oh, AI doesn't work. It's like, well, like you got to fix the broken element first
Mhm.
and then put AI on it. And then you'll start to see the mega results.
I really like the description of it's putting a rocket pack, and if you're not doing it right, you will be miles in the wrong direction. One of our brands that we own, we do a full AI readiness audit for clients.
Nice.
And a lot of that is to make sure that, one, that they're, you know, to a point where they can start competing to appear in AI search, or, to highlight the areas that, they're deficit, where that foundation is shaky and they need to kind of shore that up before they invest in trying to, kind of appear there. So I think that you're right. That's across all industries, I'm sure, is an issue. We had a guest on probably a couple months ago now, and he had a company where they consult and they go into businesses and they help them identify areas that they can, build AI agents or kind of implement AI into the workflow to become more efficient. And one of the things that he, related back to us is that there are a lot of companies he goes into that call him after they've tried, right? Where they've tried to implement something and they're like, we got Claude and we did all this and it deleted half our database. What did we do wrong? Kind of deal. And and so it's really interesting. And I think that you're right. A lot of people just aren't ready for it. Um, and I think that idea of, you recognizing that when you built Broker Nest and then building Stack 72 to kind of feed into that and help people get to that point, whether, it's identifying things that they're underutilizing that they maybe could manually do, like the database outreach and things like that, or kind of getting them ready for it. I think that's a really cool idea. Um, and it shows that, you've been definitely listening to the customers that you had and trying to figure out, okay, how can we help them become, ready for this and kind of leverage this to grow.
Yeah. And no one wants to be learning a new technology and like a totally new industry. Like,
Hmm.
people get a real estate license to sell real estate. People develop
Yeah.
real estate to build buildings. People, own buildings so that they can run the building. They're not trying to learn this whole other thing. And we
Yeah.
were really we were really conscious of that when we built out Broker Nest. When I had a meeting with a couple of the developers that I brought on to do it, the coding developers. I always have to specify that because there's real estate developers and coding developers.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
but the coding developers, their initial push was like, let's just build a platform and we'll integrate it. We'll get the agents to come onto the platform and then they'll use it and it'll be awesome. And I was like, I'm telling you, they're never going to use it because it's just going to be like another tool. And so
Mhm.
what we ended up doing was essentially building something out that works with their CRM. So we do like a direct integration into their CRM and we almost become like the mission control, but they're not giving up the existing tech stack. So we're super easy to use. You can set us up in about, I don't know, 9 clicks of the mouse. Super easy to run campaigns. And we spent a lot of time on that because I just didn't want to be another tool on the shelf that people paid X amount of money for per month. And then at the end of the year, they do their audit and they're like, well, we don't really use Broker Nest. I
Mhm.
want it to be like, we used Broker Nest and we did X number of deals as a result of it. And it paid for itself so many times over that it would be like the craziest thing to give up.
Yeah, and I think that's where that is going to be kind of the reckoning in a year or two when people have kind of gone through in every industry and gone through and gotten all these tools. And then at bigger companies, their CFO said like, all right, let's justify some of the software expenses, right? Like how much of this is actually impactful and useful? um, all the way down to, you know, realtors, or a lot of that money is coming out of their own pocket, right? Or,
Yeah.
you know, the local company that they work for. But that's like impactful at a much bigger level. So my eldest sister Jane, she's a realtor, right? I can't profess to know much about the realty process or anything, but she is an incredibly good at building human connections. And you talk to her for 5 minutes and she's your best friend kind of deal. She is
Right.
not tech savvy. so
Yeah.
so kind of finding that way to work with people must be really interesting when you know realtors as a cohort aren't necessarily very tech savvy. And I think that leads to the question of like, do you think that older generations of real estate agents specifically are behind if they're not willing to use, or not willing or able to use AI in their daily workflow? Do you feel like that's a big hindrance to success now?
Um, yeah, I think that in the next, call it maybe not year or 2 years, but like 5-ish years, you will it'll be very, very hard to be like a broker or an agent that does not use any AI. Like, if you're sort of on the over the hill, down the hill moment of your career, you might be able to get away with it because you have an existing client base and maybe you work with older people who are not using AI. But, like my dad uses AI and he goes and talks to Chat GPT and like he calls me and he's like, you'll never believe what AI just told me. And like, it's like, it's interesting because, he is that generation, but he is still using it. And so, and he has no reason or purpose, or it's not within like, he's retired. So
Mhm.
like, as more and more people use it, I think you'll have to use it. And so if like, the problem is it's like, I think for people who are not necessarily tech savvy, like one, it's scary. right? Like,
Mhm.
is this thing going to replace me? Um, but then like the other thing is like, where do I even start? Because
Yeah.
it's not like a building that you walk into and there's one front door and that's the only place to go in. Like, it's a million different ways that you can try. And if you like prompt one thing in ChatGPT or Claude and it doesn't give you the thing you want, it's like, who's there to necessarily help you or designed to help you figure it out? So education is crucial. And I think the biggest thing is like, AI is this like equalizer in knowledge. Whereas, like, as long as you have an internet connection, you basically have access to the universe of information. But like learning how to use it properly is a big thing. And so I think you'll have more of the older generation or non-tech savvy spend more time on education to get there and become a little more comfortable with it. Um, and then there's the back end of it, which is work ethic, right? So once you have the
Mhm.
information, what do you do with it at the end of the day? But um, I say 5 years, you'd almost be impossible not to use it at some sort.
Yeah, and I think that tracks with a lot of what we see in, specifically in the marketing industry, which is, my core competency that I can speak to. Something that we've seen a lot of is kind of that, Newton's first law of motion, that an object at rest tends to stay at rest, right?
Yeah.
Um, so a lot of people finding that inertia to get started is really difficult. But what we've noticed is that as people get, that first step out of the way, suddenly it's no longer a like, oh, I have to learn how to do this for my job. It's, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like,
Yeah.
I can do that. That's going to save me so much time. Oh, I can do this. That's going to help me, hit my quarterly goal, or that'll help us generate tools to generate leads or anything along those lines. So I think that that portion of it is true across even younger generations. I mean, I'm 38. I like to think I'm still young, but maybe I'm creeping up to maybe I'm thoroughly entrenched in middle age now with two kids. But even, me, the first time I got into a tool, I was like, all right, I've got to try to do this. And now it's like I couldn't imagine working without it.
Right.
Like, how did I used to do all that work without this? Um, so yeah, it's definitely interesting.
I think
You know,
I think
so,
that
so
I think that like Claude or ChatGPT, whichever one, because like they're both really good at this point. I think like like at bare minimum, a pro subscription at $20 a month.
mhm.
I'm on like the max plan for both, just because I have my usage is so high. But like I spend the equivalence of like $500 a month, let's say between both of them. I think it's like the greatest investment of $500 that there has been probably since like you could have an internet subscription. There's nothing that gives you more leverage in society today than like that subscription if you use it properly. And at $20, it like if you have any business use case whatsoever, it's like you're doing yourself a massive disservice if you don't have that plan at bare minimum.
It's it's impossible not to get a positive ROI out of a $20 investment in it, even if all it does is save you 2 hours in the month,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
which it'll do a lot more than that. But even if that's all that you get out of it, I mean, I would pay $20 a month to spend an extra couple of hours with my kids every month, or something like that.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, it's like your big why.
yeah, exactly. So completely jumping topics. Something we usually talk about with clients, or something that comes up a lot with our audience and people want to know about, is kind of how ethics and AI relate, right? And when it comes to ethics and human interaction, do you think that AI can strengthen, or do you think it weakens the trust that's really needed between a real estate agent and a client?
It's such a good question, and I think it's a really important question. And it's a question that like we have to be asking ourselves, not just in real estate, but like as a society. Is and it's that old adage of like give somebody a bunch of money and you kind of see their like true personality come through. So like if they're a good person, they'll be like a scaled good person. If they're bad, then like they'll be more bad. I think AI is very, very similar. Um, so I think as a client, I believe that I would be using it to check who you're working with, let's say, like on the real estate agent side specifically. Um, it's become a little bit better with like Zillow reviews and Google reviews and things like
Mhm,
that, where you can actually get some live feedback. Um, but there's definitely ethical concerns because people will use it for bad. Most people are going to use it for good. You just don't want to be involved with the guy who uses it for bad. And usually, bad is kind of like one step above, like ahead of good, right? Because the good security is always trying to catch the bad guy.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, ethics is definitely it's a massive concern. But I also think it's a concern that like society figures out, just like we have with everything else. It's just everything is so new right now. There's so many things that are changing. It would be impossible to implement legislation because in the down in the US, like Congress works at a snail's pace compared to
Mhm.
like how quickly AI is advancing. In Canada, it's not much different than that. So ethics becomes a major thing. Um, but there's always been bad actors in every industry, and I think that that's not going to change or go away. But what I do like is that AI at least gives you some tools as a consumer to try to protect yourself, where maybe you weren't able to do that before.
Yeah, and I think that something you said, I think is happening in the moment right now. That people will kind of police it themselves. Like if the use of AI gets, goes from useful and helpful to unethical. And I think one of the examples I mentioned earlier of, you know, an agent that was, somebody posted on Reddit and an agent was, basically doctoring photos. The photo of on the listing was, the front of the house, and they had touched it up with AI, but the AI had rebuilt a retaining wall in the driveway. It planted trees, it repainted the door. And then when they saw it in person, they're like, "Oh, like the retaining wall on the side of the driveway is crumbling, and there's no trees here, and like the door hasn't been painted in years." So, I think that the people that do use it unethically, because I would consider that kind of misrepresenting a property,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Which,
yeah.
yeah, which I don't think anybody would be on board with. I think that those are going to very quickly become like at best, that person, that realtor didn't catch that it had done that. At worst, they were using it to get more people in the door. And I think that there will be a big backlash against things like that. And yeah, I think that people police it themselves. We've seen it a lot in a lot of different areas.
It's
Um,
also brand as well, right? Like
mhm,
the creation of your brand is so important. And it's like, what do people associate when they hear like your name or see your company logo or that? And brand has like an interesting way of uh, accelerating your growth, but also like defeating it. And I don't think it takes too many bad moves of
mhm.
bad photos of shady houses before like the buyers are like, oh yeah, that's the agent who makes the houses look unrealistic. It's like, let's
Yeah,
not even go there. And then it's like the damage that it does is not worth what it does to your brand ultimately.
yeah, absolutely. And I can guarantee that house was getting a bunch of showings booked, but nobody was buying it once they saw it in person, which, means it's going to sit on the market for a while, which means the seller is going to drop the price because they
Yeah.
think that's the issue. And it's just going to be kind of, a terrible experience for everybody involved. So you're right. They will get that reputation, and that personal brand really matters.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so one of the biggest platforms out there for real estate, at least from yeah, the consumer, is Zillow. Um, do you think traditional platforms like Zillow are at risk from AI powered search experiences? So do you think that in the future people won't need to go to these specialized platforms and instead will be able to, go into Chat GPT or Claude or even, Gemini and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a 4-bed, 3-bath house under $600,000 in this zip code. Here are my requirements. It needs a pool, or whatever." Do you think that eventually AI will get to that point where those kind of surfacing of properties is done on platform instead of in specific uh, sites like Zillow, or I forget the name of the other big one. Um,
Yeah.
do you
There's
think
a,
that's a
but yeah, it's the the one thing Zillow has working in its favor is obviously it's well capitalized and it's built a great brand. So they'll have the ability to pivot. If people start searching more, there becomes an opportunity to search on like a large language model versus going into like their system. Um, maybe maybe their next phase, or like the version 2 of the Zillow we see today, is more of like a large language model where there is a search and you just write what you want and you go from
hmm,
there. So it's I don't see them being replaced. I see possibly like a business pivot, but um, I think they've developed too much of a moat in the industry to necessarily be like totally extinct in a short period of time, as long as they react, right? Like if they don't
mhm.
react, then they'll become like the Blockbuster to the Netflix kind of story. But if they do have the ability to modify what they do and to serve people the way that they want to be served, I see them retaining that industry strength, whether it's like, Zillow or Redfin or
Mhm.
Realtor, whatever those platforms are.
Redfin. I knew it was Red something. I couldn't remember the last of it. Yeah, I think that's a very, very valid point. I think that if they can leverage that moat that they currently have and, kind of ride the wave of AI to become more of a large language model where people can, instead of having to manually go through 40 or 50 houses, just get a short list of recommendations based on their breakdown instead of having to filter it all out. And, that could be a way that they kind of keep up with it.
One,
We are,
what,
sorry.
sorry, just one point before we move on from that. One, one possibility, and I could see this becoming more widely adopted, is a lot of companies lose their existing user interface, and a lot of the interaction with the platform becomes voice oriented because it's way faster than like typing, and you can literally just like press a button and talk to it. And I think if the industry moves further in that direction, we could see almost necessarily not no interface, but barely an interface where the first thing is like a voice prompt and then it spits out what you want. And so if it has an ability to adapt to that, I could see that starting to become a model for the future.
So that's actually really interesting. Eh, anecdote time, but I have a 2.5-year-old. Uh, I had an old TV. It was like 10 years old, Black Friday special. It did not survive my toddler. so so yesterday I went out and I got a new TV, nothing crazy, but I got, a Samsung TV. And I was looking through the menu last night after I'd set it up and I'm like, it's so confusing. Like, how do I find this app? It's all voice powered now by Alexa. So you just press a button, the remote has a mic in it, and you say like, I want to download YouTube TV, or my son wants to watch Bluey, and it'll open the app and go straight
Wow.
to that page, which is really, really cool. And I think kind of ties into that idea of, voice taking over. Like I didn't expect on a TV. My TV was 10 years old. I was manually typing everything in, and especially on a TV that takes a while. So it was a really cool, use case for exactly that in real time.
Yeah.
So we are running up on time. I do want to ask one last question. If, for all the real estate agents that may be listening here, if real estate agents aren't using AI, what do you feel is the first thing that they should implement?
So the first thing you'd want to do is just to become familiar with either ChatGPT or Claude, one of the two. Don't be overwhelmed by the tools. Don't be sort of attracted to 10 shiny different objects like we talked about earlier. Um, and you're not going to break anything. So just like go into, let's say, Claude and just give it a little bit of information. So there's within the settings, one of the first items that you see is like you can enter about you, and you just basically are going to give it a little paragraph about yourself, and you just want to explain like I'm a realtor. This is the market that I serve. This is my niche. Here's about like what's important about my brand. Here's my why. Like the more you can give it, the better. And what that basically does is it almost like adjusts the answers to be more catered to what you're looking for. And then once you have that set up, I would just go into the context box where you can type in and just start asking it questions about here's what I was working on. How could you help? Don't tell it what you want it to do. Ask it what it can do for you. It's a reframing of saying, here's the context. I'm a realtor. I work in this market. I represent buyers in downtown Miami or Brickell, Miami, let's say. Um, Generally, first time buyers who work in finance. What are some ideas that you can give me to run a new marketing campaign? And then it will literally give you some really good ideas and it will give you some bad ideas too. But the thing is, like, you need the expertise, and if you can take the context and say these three are awesome, I'm going to run with these. So
Mhm.
again, play with the tool. Start with ChatGPT or Claude. Um, Start with the free model for the first like couple days. Jump up to the $20 plan. I'm telling you, it's well worth it. You won't find another investment that's better for $20. But then, like, really start asking it how it can help you. And I think that the results you'll get, A, it will be great, but B, it'll also give you more confidence and it starts to like give you more ideas, right? Because you can
It's
say,
that
like, oh, it's
positive feedback loop. Yeah.
totally. And then from there, you basically are just going to gain more confidence, stack one more tool on as you feel more comfortable, but like go slow. And like, I don't think AI is replacing the humankind in the next year or two. It's going to move slower than they probably think. And so be patient, give yourself patience with it if it's new for you. Just like anything else, it takes time to learn. But once you do, um, you probably won't be able to live without it.
I think that's fantastic advice. And I think that, you know, that's great advice for, realtors. It's great advice for anybody that's looking to get into utilizing AI as a tool for their business or their work. So thank you again for joining us today, Mitch, and happy birthday again. I appreciate you taking the time on your birthday to join us. Um, Before we close out, where can people find you? Do you
For
want
sure. So
to, kind of give a shout out to your business, your LinkedIn, your websites?
absolutely. So I'm LinkedIn at Mitch Parker. Pretty easy to find me there. My other social handles are Mitch Parker RE, like real estate. And then my company is brokerness.ai and then stack72, like the number 72.ai as well.
Awesome. So, yeah, thank you again. Great conversation. You know, I really enjoyed our conversation. I loved, kind of learning more about how AI is being utilized in the real estate world and how you're kind of helping lead the charge there. So, for our audience, thank you for your time today. If you like this episode, please make sure to hit follow, leave a review, and as always, comment on any topics you'd like us to cover. It really helps us when we are sourcing guests for the podcast and helps make us, make sure that we're making content that is relevant for y'all. So I'll see y'all next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Tristan. Thank you, Christina.